All right, welcome everyone. We're going to give it just an extra minute or so as folks trickle in, since we're all running from one meeting to the next. So as you're joining, feel free to say hello in the chat. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and as you're doing that, if you want to say kind of what brings you here to the session, I'm curious if there are folks who have utilized SkyUX with add-ins before. So if we have some pro coders out there, you're just interested in SkyUX as a design system, kind of what level of from the low code to pro code you might be. Don't be shy. All right, cool. It looks like just some beginning interest, it looks like from most of y'all. So it's exciting. Excited to kind of walk you through SkyUX and get going. The numbers are still increasing, so let's give it a few more seconds. And just to make sure folks are in the right session, we are talking about a SkyUX design system here. All right, looks like we're slowing down, so I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off. So if you're expecting to talk about the SkyUX design system, you are in the right place. If you weren't expecting to talk about the SkyUX design system, well, welcome. Stay here, it'll be fun. All right, before we jump in, a little bit about me. So my name's Kerry Campbell. Pronouns are she, her. I am a principal technical product manager, senior principal technical product manager. It's always a mouthful here at Blackbaud. And I focus on the developer experience for when folks are using SkyUX, which is our front end design framework and design system. So it's really focusing on how to make sure engineers and designers are able to use the design system in successful ways. I am located in beautiful gray and cloudy Portland, Oregon, and I've been with Blackbaud for 3.5 years. So if you've seen other Blackbaud colleagues, you know that that's not a long tenure here at Blackbaud. And also, if you do the math, you'll know that I joined during the height of the pandemic after just also becoming a first-time parent. So it's definitely a leap of faith to join Blackbaud. But just like with all things we do, from an innovation perspective, like learning comes as you go into those uncomfortable places. It sparks you to think of new ideas. So kind of leaning into the uncertainty can be really helpful. One of the things I love here about Blackbaud is how rich and deep our culture is around supporting customers and all of your constituents is going and helping to find ways to solve their problems. Let's see. All right, so let's go ahead. Just trying to advance. There it goes. Slides aren't advancing. All right, so just kind of overview of what we're going to chat about today. So we'll talk kind of just about SkyUX as a design system and in general what a design system is and how there's kind of different levels of utilization you can have from an external perspective. New features and functionality that we've built and kind of what's coming up next for us. So design systems. If you haven't heard of a design system before, there's a lot of pieces that kind of go into an overall design system. So When you consider a primary goal of the design system being to help users anticipate how to interact with a product, the first thing you want to consider about the design system is the style guide. So an oversimplification of this can be that the design system could just focus on the color elements of a user experience. So from the user's perspective of interacting with a product, having part of the UI drastically unaligned with the rest of the surrounding product UI can cause confusion and uncertainty in the experience and have them feeling like just not sure about what the next step is to do. So they can think things like, oh, I'm really used to having a blue button that tells me where to focus my attention for all the actions I need to be done. But now all I see are green buttons. So this can lead to less adoption of features or lower the user's feelings of the visual cohesion and connection between different products. So once you're kind of past that like paint of the design system, we can consider how you apply it. So design guidelines help define when to apply different visual treatments. So thinking of the blue versus green button, style guide tells you you should use blue buttons. The design guidelines tells you that you should use those blue buttons for primary actions on the page. At least that's specific to the Sky UX design system. Because you don't want all of your buttons to be blue. How will the user know where to go? So making sure you have your most important actions called out as blue, and then the rest, for our example, would be white in Sky UX. This helps standardize the user's expectation of where they should be focusing their attention. Design patterns, so kind of further down the rabbit hole of the design system. These are the common UI elements that are used throughout the product. So we've talked about buttons, very common UI elements. You can also think of other UI elements such as data grids or input fields. Blackbaud products are largely made up of data grids. So we have lots of lists in our platform, and record pages, different types of record pages, whether that be financial records, constituent records, what have you. And so those kind of standard UI elements that you would see on the page are different patterns that you can use to implement and create those pages. So then finally, we come to the component library. This is the part of the design system that I actually own as the Sky UX product manager. And I should have mentioned, I am not a designer, nor am I an engineer. We have a lot of folks who help support the design system. We have a fantastic engineering team and a great design team who puts a lot of time and effort into it. But the component library is our technical implementation of all of the styles and guidelines and patterns to make it more consistent and reusable with inside of our products. And so it's really a focus on making sure that consumers of the Sky UX component library can get the right thing, like the right interaction pattern, the right design, the right layout, more out of the box, not having to like mess around with, oh, there's 5 pixels need to be here, but we have classes that help with that instead, and different page layouts. So it's really looking to help make that development easier. All right, so Sky UX, as I said, is our design system here at Blackbaud. And really it's a framework design system. You can use a host of words to describe what we're trying to provide both internally and externally to partners and customers is a way to have good user experiences and user experiences that meet the expectation of the typical users that we share in common. So we provide this open source to the community. And one of the benefits, like I said, we have a whole host of designers and engineers working on this. We've put a lot of time and money as a company into it to help standardize our products. And utilizing Sky UX, you basically are getting that for free. You can use it and you can integrate more cohesively into our products. So that's one of the great benefits of having this open source library. Some of the key things we focus on and fundamental philosophies of Sky UX. So the first thing being consistency. So we've touched a lot on that already. We want to have that consistent user experience across our products, but we also want to help provide consistent ways of interacting with Sky UX as a product. So as a component library, as a design system, we want you as a user of the design system to know where to go and look and find the information you need to. We very much think of it as a product that we are offering out. So ease of use, again, there's the two-sided way of thinking of that. Ease of use for all of our end users utilizing our products, making sure that they know what to do when, as well as the ease of use of our design system. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the work we've been doing within SkyUX to make some of our components easier to implement. Efficiency. This is a big focus internally, but there's a lot of the things that we do internally that also benefits external consumers of SkyUX. So we all know that at the end of the day, like making a web experience isn't actually our end goal. We have other things that we want to do in life and make it happen, whether that be at work or personal. We want to be able to enable our developers and designers to efficiently utilize the system and get on to things that add value. So like I mentioned, having things oriented and put on the right place in the page, especially when it's consistently done the same way over and over again, spending time doing those different layouts or spacing and having to think through that every time you do it isn't very efficient. If it's the same all the time, we want to make that a pattern. We want to make that a component and help standardize it for consumers. Accessibility, that's a big focus. So this is digital accessibility. So how different people interact and use assistive technologies on the web. We have a core focus on accessibility, and it's one of the main drivers we've been having over the last couple of years is how to improve the digital accessibility of our products and how to make that inherent with inside of the components itself. So if you use SkyUX as a component library, you get XYZ for free for accessibility because we've built those in as first-class features. And then quality, making sure that we are delivering quality features and functionality to you, providing testing frameworks so that you can make sure that as you're developing and accepting those changes, you know what those changes have done to your products. All right, so using SkyUX, from this perspective, from our external consumer perspective, it's usually around using SkyUX for add-ins. So we have add-ins kind of all over the place. This one's an example of a tile on top of a tile dashboard. We see these tile dashboards across different products and across different record types. So these are great ways for you to get your product, your workflow in front of our shared users and give them access into your products. You can also see tile dashboards on top of a flyout. And then we also have tab add-ins. I don't know why I didn't put it here, but you also have a full page add-in that was new as of last year or the year before. So you can have a full page context. You can launch those things from buttons and different ways to integrate and extend our products. So extending our products and having that is why we're here talking at this developer conference, figuring out ways that you can help enable users to be more efficient in their day-to-day with all of their different things they need to be done. All right, so when you're thinking around utilizing SkyUX, I kind of think there's three different ways to think about it. So for internally, we are what I would say is all in on Angular. We have an Angular component library for the design system. Internally, net new features are being built using SkyUX components on our framework, and we're delivering SPA's single-page applications in order to drive new features. This might not always be realistic for external consumers. The benefits of utilizing our Angular component library is that, one, we maintain it. So it's updated twice a year. You're getting those maintenance, which for front-end security is a big concern. So we're maintaining that library and helping you keep up to date. And then as we have changes to the actual design system, whether it be look and feel, or as we talked about last year, some of the changes between our modern visual theme, visual styling, and our default visual theme, having the ability to switch back and forth, that's built into our components. So there is a benefit of that. If you haven't utilized our components before and are looking at building a new UI and you want to dip your foot into the Angular world, consider that path. But we also know that you might have other tools you're using, especially from like a low code perspective, you might just be trying to kind of make what existing UI you have look a little bit more like Blackbaud, just so it doesn't stand out too much when you have that tile on a page. So you can use our component documentation to just see how our components look and feel and operate, what the interactions are, and you can have a user experience that's similar to that. You can also use our style sheet. So we provide all the color and spacing and atomic parts of components that you can just lift and put into your own. Both of these, they have their benefits of helping create that cohesive experience for the user. So they're not feeling like they're drastically going from one look and feel to another. But as we do updates to the design system, you would have to independently do that. And we don't typically actually post or announce like, we've changed to this color. So it's a little bit more due diligence on your side to maintain it. And especially as we are moving towards the new modern visual theme, that ability to have the components manage the styling differences is also not there. So those are kind of the different levels of engagement with the design system that you can have. All right. So new features, updates that we've been doing. So like I called out, accessibility has been one of our focuses as a group in trying to make sure we have accessible components. So WCAG 2.1 AA compliance. So that's an international standard around accessibility, digital accessibility guidelines in order to provide an accessible and usable system for folks who are utilizing assistive technology. So assistive technology might be things like a screen reader or other different controls that you use, keyboard navigation. We all use keyboard navigation within our products. And it's interesting to see how sometimes especially a financial user who's maybe more of like an Excel type user likes to click through things really quick with keyboard navigations, and balancing that with the accessible guidelines and requirements. Anyway, so when SkyUX was originally built nearly a decade ago, WCAG 2.0 was the common standard available at the time. It's now been updated to 2.1. 2.2 was actually just released late last year. And so it's important to note that these are guidelines. These are like ways in which is recommended to help integrate with assistive technologies. There are some rules and regulations, more international, around requiring specific WCAG guidelines. Local to the US, we have Section 508, which has similar standards and are looking at actually adopting the WCAG standards directly, as opposed to having a slightly different list of guidelines. But it's a way that across both the folks who build assistive technologies and those who are building websites can have similar expectations of how things should interact. And so we reviewed the changes between the 2.0 and the 2.1 guidelines mid last year, and we started implementing changes to meet some of the new guidelines. So there are just new guidelines that we did not have, that we were not yet meeting. So we added those into the components, and then other guidelines that we just had not yet met successfully. So we've built as much as we can into it. I'll always say that accessibility is a shared responsibility from both the component library side and then the individual consumers implementing it to make sure that end users really have that full access. But we have automated as much as we can, and I'll actually talk about a specific project we've been working on, which technically actually is the next one on this list. So form field component simplification. We have a number of form fields. So form fields are things like input boxes, date selection fields, checkboxes, radio groups, text editors. We have a lot of forms across our products. And so you need to fill out something, whether it's filling out information about a constituent or filling out information about an expenditure you had. So these components had evolved over time and had different implementations, but we've updated them to all be configured based on inputs. So I like to have my made up word of inputizing the component library. So over time, we had built on different features, and instead of having to implement those each individually, built them in as inputs. And we're actually going to get into more details on this specific project. But it helps automate a lot of the usability and really enhance the consistency so that things are being shown to end users more consistent, so you don't have to do it yourself. And then the final one also recently, so there's a couple new components. The first one released last year, which is a full page component, and it helps standardize layout. As you navigate around some of our products, you'll notice that pages kind of where the header is or the spacing from the sides, it's all a little bit wonky. Previously, we had guidelines around that, but we didn't have a technical component to wrap the whole thing in that would provide those spacings. So now we have a page component that provides that wrapper of this page spacing. And then another component, which actually hasn't released yet, coming soon, it's in the documentation stages right now, is field group component. As part of our form field work, so on forms you have different sections and you want to be able to group like inputs together. There's semantic needs from an accessibility perspective, and then just a visual hierarchy in order to be able to group these things together. So it was kind of a win of all of these different pieces of standardizing layouts and having consistent forms and meeting accessibility guidelines. It's just kind of been this cohesion of a bunch of different features. So I wanted to take a step through the form field simplification work we did as kind of an interesting test case in innovation. We heard from Jerry in the kickoff this morning around how innovation really comes from questioning what has come before and evaluating, is that really what we want to continue doing? Is there something we could be doing differently? And so we had internal consumers saying, like, came to us and said that they were having a hard time having consistent implementation of our components. They were onboarding new team members, and there were so many different pieces that were added over time. And Sky UX as a component library is nearly a decade old. Maybe it's more than a decade old at this time. I always forget the exact year. But it's grown. And so as it's grown and as we've added new functionality, most of that new functionality we add in a non-breaking way. So we want to add new features, and you can optionally opt into them. And we provide guidance as far as how you would implement that. And so when you take something, and this can be any problem that you're trying to solve, and you try and solve that over a period of time, it can be really easy to keep going that way. Like, oh, I'm going to add a new feature. I'm going to follow the way that we've done it in the past. Users will have to add in a component inside of the input in order to show an inline help, and we'll continue doing that. But actually finding a solution that solves the implementation issue really makes us take a step back and say, is there actually an easier way we could be doing this? Is there a different way that we could approach this problem to help consumers have an easier time of this? So for this example, so we used to have 97 lines of code in order to create a single input box with a help inline popover in an accessible manner. So you can imagine a form field that has that you would enter your name, and it says it has a little help icon that you could click on and have a popover that gives more description of the name field. It took that many lines of code, and we've reduced it down to 9. So really focusing on what can we do for consumers to automate all of it. A lot of that code was around accessibility, implementation functionality, making sure that labels were appropriately related to the form field and having that relationship mapped. And frankly, while it takes 97 lines of code to do it in the correct accessible way, that wasn't happening. So we weren't actually having developers spending time writing 96 lines of code. Instead, we were having forms that were either inaccessible or not fully semantically correct. And so in a way to solve this, we kind of throughout the handbook of what we had been doing, we actually deprecated components that we had created. And I think from an innovation perspective, sometimes you can fall into that sunk cost fallacy of thinking we've done all of this work, how could we throw it away? And it's hard when you're taking a look back at all the ways that we've iterated over time and say, we're going to stop and we're going to change directions. We're going to walk down a different path. We're going to change our approach to this. And it's been a fun kind of learning experience over the last year of where we have been previously thinking, this is how it's always been done. We're going to keep on this path and thinking through new ways. So, well, slide progression didn't actually happen. Those are the 9 lines of code now that you get to write for input boxes. And this was specifically for input box. This was released last year, and we are actively in preview state for the rest of the form fields that are receiving these features. So the specific features that we've released as part of this is label text, which there's actually another session I'll give you more details on after this around labels. But providing just an input for label text instead of having to put a label component as part of the input box. Help content, automating the popover and the interaction and the relationship of the help content popover, as well as being able to invoke our help panel or your own flyout for help context. Standardizing hint text. Hint text is an interesting one from an accessibility perspective as well. We used to have inline placeholder text for suggestions around formats, as well as just kind of no good way to have like that persistent visual hint. So placing it as an input that then places it correctly related to the field. Making sure that the required attribute is showing in the correct way, that errors are lighting up appropriately and relating to the label, as well as having things stacked vertically and having the right spacing between them. So these are all new features that we've enabled through inputs that you can code on your SkyUX design. And I should call out again, this is definitely the pro code version of SkyUX. This is using our component library in order to achieve that. But in which you can learn more with inside of our documentation, but it's also something that you can just learn more about yourself if you're interested in figuring out how you can make sure that the way that you are developing is accessible. You go there. So this is developer.blackbaud.com/SkyUX. That's our documentation site, and then we also have our GitHub repository. All right, up next, we have ongoing maintenance. So we continue to maintain, like I called out earlier, the value of utilizing the SkyUX component library as a package that you install, is that you continue to get the updates that we release. We release twice a year. We've actually standardized to March, kind of the end of March, and September based on some of our regular planning cycles internally to Blackbaud. Previously, we had been following Angular's twice a year release process, but we've decoupled a little bit from that. This means that you'll continue to get updates to front-end packages, so vulnerability management for front-end, and making sure that you are providing secure front ends, keeping up to date on that. So just want to make a big call out. You can adopt SkyUX, and you need to continue to maintain your own front end as well. And we help provide that through those ongoing maintenance releases. And then I also want to call out the continued adoption of the modern visual theme. So we presented on this last year. This is actually just a screenshot. I know you're probably squinting trying to read that. Don't do that. On our documentation site, there is more information on our visual theme. And again, one of the benefits of using the component library directly is that you have the ability to switch between these themes. We are continuing to push internally for adoption of the modern visual styles, and you'll be seeing that come out through some of our different products, and be seeing those changes. So just a reminder that there are 2 different visual themes. If you go to our documentation site, you can toggle it at the top to see those 2 different themes on our components, and that adoption is ongoing. So kind of look to the products for more details on when they're doing different changes and how that might affect different add-ins that you have. All right, and then last, just calling out some more learning opportunities at during BB Dev Days. Um, we have an expert session starting next, so directly following this at noon or whatever time you're zoning at the top of the hour. Is an expert session around accessible web development and how um, labels and making sure that you have the right semantic hierarchy is being utilized correctly. So that's regardless of whether you use SkyUX or not. This is important to make sure that you are considering as part of UIs that you're creating. And then if you are interested in getting started with our component library, tomorrow at 1:30 Eastern, we have a skills lab hosted by one of our engineers on our component team, who will be walking through how to get started and installing SkyUX and some of the basics of SkyUX. So you can definitely work more that way. All right. And also, if you have any other questions, you can always reach out to me. I'm interested to talk more. If there's anyone who would like to talk more around SkyUX, we get GitHub issues. Those come in through GitHub, and we respond to those. Feel free to reach out kind of in any way you want. I did want to open it up to questions if there's anyone who wanted to ask any questions. And just open the floor.
Kerry, we have 2 questions that came through. I put them over into the Q&A. I can go through those. Our Paul also jumped in and maybe answered them, but I wanted to make sure to run them by you just in case you had anything else to add.
Yes, Paul Crowder is our architect. So thank you, Paul, for being on the line and working the chats. I appreciate it.
Nice to have someone else to tag in.
Yes.
I don't know. Do you want to go through them, or do you feel like? I mean, I'm sure Paul probably does.
Yeah. So SkyUX inside of BBCRM is a fun question. CRM is looking to adopt SkyUX. SkyUX itself, as far as how you're utilizing it with inside of an add-in. So if you're having an add-in with inside of CRM, you can use whatever front-end framework you want. But yeah, as CRM starts to adopt more SkyUX visual styling, we will see kind of more cohesion in between those as well. And I think Paul answered the one on Power Automate, and I think I'm going to take that one. Let's see. You feed.
I think those were the only 2 that I saw. If there's any other questions that I might have missed in chat, feel free to send them now. Maybe just throw in like a hold or something like that on in messages, and we'll hang out here for just a second.
Yeah, there's a question around what data you can feed into SkyUX. So SkyUX is just a front end framework. You can hook it up to whatever backend you have. So it's just a visual UI framework. So you can connect it. We use .NET internally primarily, but yeah, you can have any data you want utilized with it.
Thanks for calling that one out. I don't see any other questions coming through. So what I'll just ask is thanks everyone for being here, and please don't forget to fill out the survey before you leave. Otherwise, thank you guys, and enjoy the rest of BB Dev Days.